live. Welcome everybody to another segment of the Regional Fishing Report. Tonight we're going to be speaking to Tim Tamarelli with the South Carolina Regional Fishing Report. Let's bring him in.
North Carolina.
Hi. How are you? Oh, sorry, wrong area.
North Carolina.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, like I said, I'm running on zero sleep for the past 2 days, so hopefully everyone will bear with me tonight. One thing I'd like to say about Tim, actually a couple of things I'd like to say about Tim to introduce him. So Tim is a very diverse man. You hunt, right? You fish.
Yes.
You are a kayak guide. You're a military veteran. You're a volunteer. You are an encourager on your social media. You just a great man to know. And I'm glad to call you my friend and to know you. So I just wanted to introduce everyone to Tim. If you haven't met him on our previous regional fishing reports, really glad to have you tonight, Tim.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what is going on in your area?
The fishing's been really good. I haven't been on the water a whole lot in the last week. I'm actually working on a house right now, but last time I was out, they were still taking top waters slowly. Most of the bites that we were getting that were any size fish to them were mainly on cut baits or live baits.
Mm-hmm.
The water's been real warm, so they've gotten kind of slack on what they decide to do. You got to be more patient with them than you are with yourself.
Yeah. That's always the key when you're fishing, right? To have patience.
Yes, exactly. Everything, like I said before, everything you got to present. Waters get warmer like that. Redfish are the laziest fish in the water. They don't want to chase, they're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
So your presentation has to go a lot shorter and a lot slower than you normally would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before we get into reds, because that is a hot topic, I think, pretty much up and down the East Coast for our other regional fishing reports as well. Just want to mention that we're going to do a trivia question tonight. We're going to bring it up on the screen. Okay, great. It's up on the screen. So tonight's prize, am I allowed to say what the prize is? All right, cool. I got the go. So we have a gift certificate, $20 off a custom fishing rod. This is actually Grant's fishing rod. It's customly made for him as well. Crazy Horse Elliot. And he used it actually, I think, to catch what did you catch? 50-inch cobia. Yes. So it's Backyard Custom Rods has made some really great custom fishing rods for us. And that is what we're giving out tonight as the prize, $20 off a custom fishing rod. That's an exciting prize. Don't you think so, Tim?
I would definitely agree. That was a nice cobia he caught the other day.
For sure. I don't know about you. Your rod was also custom made as well, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Mine is specifically for reds. What is yours for?
The ones that I have custom made, I have two different rods that are built. One is mainly for reds. They will handle trout as well, but they're a little bit more stiff than I care for trout. I have another blank that's used as the same type that is made specifically for trout and smaller fish. Has a little bit less backbone to it, a little bit more give in the rod.
That's good weapons to have in your arsenal on your kayak.
Yes.
For sure.
I actually have one that I actually stopped using because I'm already getting it worn down from catching red drum on it.
Got to be so good at catching red drums. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty on some of the fish you've been catching. We started talking about reds. Can you share with us some more about what's going on in your region, and also being a kayak fisherman, how are you catching those reds?
Okay, when I'm fishing for reds off the kayak, I'm moving slow through the water. I don't go fast. If you're paddling too fast, you're scaring the fish long before you even get to them. And it all depends on our water clarity. If the water is darker in color, muddy looking, or as we call it, iced tea looking, you have a better chance of sneaking up on them than you do if the water is clear. But it's just like when you're catching bait off of a bank. If you take a step or two on the bank,
Yeah.
you've seen bait. That bait's already heard you, and you already see it moving before you even get to it. Red drum or any other fish in the water is the same way. They sense that little vibration from you stepping.
Mm-hmm.
So even paddling, even though it's as quiet and as stealthy as it is, you have to slow down and take your time and look for, certain things in the waterway that letting you know that there's reds there. Reds don't act like mullet do or black drum or anything like that. When they're moving around in the waterway, if they're schooled up, you'll see a big wake push on the surface, like a boat without a boat being there. Other times you're paddling along and you might get right up next to them, and the next thing you know, you look in the water, all you see is a big mud boil, and you'll see an arch. When that fish runs, he'll either arch right or he'll arch left. They never run directly straight away from you. And that's a good indicator to me that there's reds in that area. So I'll start fishing for them and I'll fan cast. I'm not much of a sight fisherman. I don't have to see the fish to catch them. Some people, that's the only way they can target the reds, is they have to actually stand up on something higher than their platform and be able to see these fish before they can say that they saw a red and they can actually try to catch it. I learned my waters. I learned what to look for in the water. It's a fish of my choice that I've always cared and have a deep love for, that I try to study them the best I can at all times.
Right.
I have issues with memory, but that's one fish that doesn't get out of my memory. If I can remember where 5 years ago I was catching reds, and I can go back to that same place and still catch reds at that spot.
Wow. Yeah, that's an important point you made. I think some of the other guests we've had on our show, who everyone's really great at what they do, but the most successful ones scout and get to know their areas. Very important. Right. When fishing. Obviously, you're going to have occasions like we did when we did our 40-day, 40-night vacation up in the East Coast, going into unfamiliar territories. We can use similar tactics, but it's also helpful to know the area. So we usually talk to someone in the area just to get an idea of what's going on with the fish, because bull reds are bull reds and puppy drum are puppy drum, but they do act differently depending on what body of water they're in, the region, and things like that. So it's really good to get to know the area.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with that more. Bull reds are, of course, a much, much bigger red. They eat much, much bigger baits. So, yes. But they're still just as shy as a puppy drum is. You can't just run up onto a school of bull reds and expect that you're going to catch them unless you're out in the ocean and you see, that big red drum feeding frenzy going on out there. Then you don't have an issue. But when you're into, the upper part of the state where they get the bull reds at, and you take a motorboat out there and run through a school of fish, your chances of catching any of those fish are going to be next to nothing. You might as well go home and try next one.
For sure. It's a good idea to contact Tim for his kayak guide service, and we'll put how to connect with Tim for that. But it's good to have a guide in your area in an area that you don't know. And this is why we also have our regional fishing reports. So if you're looking to go to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida areas, definitely tune into our other regional fishing reports to learn the tips and techniques to work the fish in these areas if you haven't been there. So what other fish are you pulling out of the water these days, Tim?
I haven't got into any trout yet, but I have caught quite a few flounder, which it's not a fish I really care to catch. I usually catch them purely by accident, fishing the same spot I catch the reds at. My biggest one so far this year was 27 inches long.
Wow.
Um, it was 27 and a half, and I was out on my boat when I caught that. And it was almost the end of a dead low outgoing tide. And
Yes.
I had a jig head with a mullet, a live finger mullet attached onto it. And I had thrown it out. It sat out there for 20 minutes. Didn't get nothing. So I started reeling it in real slow, and I got smashed. And I let it sit for a second because it wasn't a red drum yet. And I waited. I think I counted the 10 in my head, and I set the hook on it. And as soon as I hooked him up, I knew it was a flounder. I just realized how big it was.
Hmm.
Which they went back to swim another day, of course, but they're closed here still. So um, artificials for that, soft plastics, anything Z-Man type. Um, I've used a lot of the Z-Man Houdinis and caught quite a few flounder on them. I kind of getting more into using gulp, and I'm not
Yeah.
using your traditional um, gulp shrimp. I'm using a 5-inch jerk shad in white and hooking it onto a jig head with a little bit of hair coming off of it. And I've been hitting some really, really nice flounder on that. Um, I catch quite a few reds with it as well. Excuse me. Like I said, reds and flounder, they're going to be in the same areas.
That's true.
Uh,
Yep.
flounder is just a little bit harder to get a hold of because they kind of stay closer to the banks where when the water drops out, you've only got inches of water. So when
Yes.
you throw a lure or a bait in there, it's kind of hard not to get hung up, unless you can figure out how to do it with a lighter jig head or whatnot, or even a top water. I caught them on top waters before.
Wow.
Biggest flounder I caught on top water was 20 and a half inches.
It's definitely bigger than the one I caught. I think we were in Georgia and it was a similar situation. This is why I'm shaking my head because it takes me back to when we were in Georgia fishing for a puppy drum. And some of them were pushing a little bit bigger.
Right.
Using the same tackle to go after the reds is
Yep.
what I caught my flounder on. And it was, I don't remember if it was an ingoing or outgoing tide, but it was definitely a low tide
Right.
situation. They were both in the same area. I didn't get the fight that you did. I'm really hoping one day I'll get a fight from a flounder. I've caught about 3 of them, 2 of them pure fishing, one of them in Georgia. But this one felt like dead weight. It
Yeah. Well,
wasn't
that
really fighting. Yeah.
even my personal test at 32 inches, 8 pounds, 11 ounces, it was like dead weight. There was no real fight to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I don't really care for them because you really don't get an awful lot of fight out of them.
Right.
I'm that person, as you know, I like to garfish and what we call trash fish. Everybody else calls trash fish. I love to fish for them. They fight, they jump, they do everything you want them to do. Um, I always said if a red drum could jump out of the water, there wouldn't be a single person in the state that wouldn't go after him. Um, I just have a good time with them. I'm waiting now. Trout should be starting up here. Should start filtering in by next month. Um, in October, they'll start getting a lot more heavier amounts of them. They'll be schooled up pretty good, and just about every time you go out, you'll be able to catch a limit with no problem at all.
Mhm.
Soft water, soft plastics. A lot of people use live shrimp. I just
Mhm.
don't use live shrimp. I can't. Everything eats live shrimp.
That is true. That is true. They are beautiful fish, bull reds, even flounder. Flounder, depending on where you're fishing, beautiful patterns, beautiful colors. So definitely, I definitely respect all the fish because they are all beautiful in their own way.
Right.
But I agree that the bull reds, I love the fight as well. I'm looking forward to my next trip where we can go fishing for some more. Um, so, are there any other fish that we can discuss that are tugging at your line this past week?
Uh, we'll get into some black drum here and there. Um,
Mhm.
I don't normally fish for a whole lot for black drum. I'm starting to for some reason. I don't know why, but I think the biggest black drum I've caught so far this year was just a little over 20 inches. Um, I've seen them dead on one of the creeks I fish that
Yeah.
looked to be about 65 pounds.
Wow.
I've heard stories of 40, 50 pound black drum being in that waterway. I just don't, like I said, I don't normally fish for most people to come to fish with me. They don't look to target them. They want to target, red drum or flounder, depending on the time of the year. And then trout, at the winter time, fall and winter sets in, everybody wants to go for trout. So I kind of basically fall on the first three fish, red, flounder, and trout. But
Hmm.
my choice really red, trout, and then flounder.
Okay.
Um, we right now we're getting there's some ladyfish in the waterways.
Mm.
We have some puffers, which those areas I had you guys in, you
Yes.
will get puffer fish up there.
Oh, wow. Those are beautiful fish too.
Yes, and you've caught
Mhm.
black drum up there.
Yes.
That, um, like I said before, I normally don't target them, but now I'm kind of on a quest. I want to go for one that's up there, something 25 and bigger, just to catch one of them. Sheephead, you can get them here. I haven't caught them. There's a fish I've never actually even targeted down here.
Hmm.
I see a lot of reports going on of people going out and limited out, on their sheephead. Um, and I'm not talking small ones either. I'm talking anywhere from 10 to 15 pound sheepheads. I hear they're really great eating. I've never
Yeah.
tried one. So I have no idea, if they're good to eat or not. I go by what everybody else is telling me what I see.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that the same. I actually caught a citation sheep's head last year. Unfortunately, I didn't have a
Right,
cooler with me, wasn't planning on keeping anything. So I gave it to the captain, and they said that, yeah, their family eats it frequently, and it is definitely a tasty
right.
meal. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah. As far as the bull reds and the trout, though, speaking to someone who's new to fishing and is not familiar, what times of the year can you find them in your area?
We don't normally get bull drum in my area down here except for off the beach, and that's very rare. Um, Everybody has their own definition what a bull red is.
Hmm.
Technically, by marine fisheries, a bull red is 40 inches and above.
Right.
Um, I've gone down to Oak Island and done tournaments down there off the kayak where usually in the October months is when they start to show up down there. And you can land, if you do it right, you launch off that beach, you can land a ton of bull reds. Even just sitting on the bank fishing, you can catch them.
Hmm.
It's a lot easier
Wow.
on a kayak because you can drift around. But here in our area, about this time of the year is when they start to show up. I just started seeing reports, I want to say last month, of them being caught one or two here and there. Uh, but right now they're getting in full force. They're not even full steam ahead yet, but they're getting
Mm.
there. You'll see people every now and then hooking into three, four, five of them. Um, but the larger numbers still haven't started to show up yet. And they're all catching really good fish.
Hmm. So I want to talk about your kayak for a minute. Do we have time? Where are we with time? Okay, we have a couple of minutes. Well, we can try to talk about this in the few minutes that we have. But we always try to speak to new fishermen or people who watch our show who've never fished before. So you're a kayak fisherman. What kind of
Right.
kayak do you recommend for maybe somebody new who wants to go fishing in your area? What's a good setup for a kayak for somebody who's starting to fish?
That's a great question, and it more depends on what they're able to afford, like if they're on a budget.
Hmm.
You can literally go to Walmart and buy a $299 kayak.
Hmm.
It'll last you maybe a year or less. It all depends on how you use it.
Hmm.
That's going to put you on the water, and it's going to help get you into where the fish are.
Hmm.
Then you can turn around and you can go into name brands and spend anywhere from 800 to $3,000 in a kayak. I mean, and more depending on what brand of kayak you go on.
Right.
The biggest thing to me is a kayak that is comfortable enough for you to sit in for a couple of hours.
Yes, yes.
Seating is number one. Um, Stability, I don't care. I've been over this subject with people many, many times over. Stability is the person in that kayak. You can take a Hobie kayak PA14 and you can flip it. You can take a native 14 and a half foot Slayer and flip it. I've had it done. I've seen it done. If you think it can't happen, think again. I have never flipped one. I have purposely flipped them. Well, I can't say I haven't flipped them. I'm sorry about that. Yes, I did. I surf launched. I made it out okay. When I came in, I rolled. But that's about the only time I've ever flipped a kayak.
Yeah. So for
Um,
somebody new, I guess it kind of sounds like you get to feel it out. Personally, I remember when I started fishing, a friend of mine gave me an inflatable and I loved it.
right,
But
right.
then you experience the more expensive decked out kayaks and sometimes
Mhm.
it's a little hard to go back. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I remember simplicity was really great for me when I first started fishing.
right,
Just even just one rod, depending on where you're going fishing, a
right,
kayak, comfortable, like you said, sitting in, because after a while, because we're family friendly, you're tukanish,
right. Oh yeah.
can start hurting, you lose circulation in your legs. So,
Yep.
personally, I recommend, something simple. Even an inflatable is really nice, easy to move around and things like that. And then just try out, follow YouTube pages, our page where we help people who are starting to learn, from people like you who give some really great information and tips how to fish for certain
Right.
fish as well. But for me, when I first started, it was trial and error. I just tried anything and everything. And, I caught some really great fish, not really knowing what I was doing.
Exactly. I mean,
But
even when I
it,
first started fishing, I used, cheap rod and reels. It cost me $17 even, no tax, that with the tax and all. It was, they call them Daiwa D shocks, and I've caught some of my biggest fish on those rod and reels.
mhm.
Now I spend $200 for a rod, another $100 for a reel, so I've got a $300 rod and reel setup. That if something happens and it gets broke,
Yeah.
I'm out $300, but I'm having fun doing
Yeah.
it.
And that's the objective for sure, right? Is to really get out there, have a good time. I think I
Right,
miss being a new anglist, is just not really worried about how big a fish is, what everybody else
right,
is pulling in, but just
right.
getting out there, really enjoying yourself, being out there with nature and just having a good time.
To me, that's what it's all about. And like I said, when I have kids out with clients fishing, I like to see the kid catch fish, so I will try and help them best I can. I'll put them in the perfect spots and everything else, and coach them as they're going through. Um, Even people that I've had come down and charter me for kayaks, they bring kids, and I try not to turn anybody away. If the kid is too young, then I'll get a tandem kayak and put them in that
Yes,
with an adult. But everybody wears a life vest. They don't never leave or go out without a life vest on. But you got to make it enjoyable for somebody, regardless of what the cost of their kayak is, what the cost of your kayak is.
for sure.
It's more about time out enjoying everything.
For sure.
And that's why I say, you can spend a little bit amount of money to go out and get a kayak, put you on the water versus going and spending 1,000 to 5,000 on a kayak that you don't even know you're gonna like when you
Right.
buy it. Um,
That
I
is
always
true.
tell people you're gonna buy a kayak, demo every kayak brand that you're thinking of buying. Take it
Mhm.
out for an hour or 2 hours, see how that seating is in it, because the seat is what's gonna sell the kayak.
Yep.
And as long as your butt is comfortable, you're gonna stay in the kayak even longer. My
Yes. Or you
kayak,
can contact Tim, who can help you get started. I had the pleasure of fishing with Tim along with Grant and had an amazing time. you know, when you're looking to learn how to fish and you're looking for a guide, you really want somebody you can really enjoy being stuck with for several hours during a hot or cold day. And I definitely recommend Tim, just a really great gentleman, funny guy, and a great conversationalist. And we love having you on the show. And we thank you so much for your time. Any last words before we sign out for this segment?
Nope, I'm good to go. I enjoyed doing the show with y'all. I enjoyed fishing with y'all that day and seeing you guys catch them fish. So I'm ready to do it again anytime y'all are.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing you next month. And until then, actually, we have another show coming up with Grant, so stay tuned. But for me, I'm going to sign off. So everybody have a good night and fish on.